Happy Friday, everybody. It's Connect Happy Valley A.M. We're live at Pine Grove Hall in beautiful Pine Grove Mills, Pennsylvania, as Canadian smoke has settled over all the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Be careful if you go outside today. If you want to come inside, when Pine Grove Hall opens up, you can come visit us, have a cup of coffee, adult bev, maybe get a good meal. Check them out at pinegrovehall.com. I'm Chris Buchignani. He's Greg Woodman. We're rolling along with the guests today on Connect Happy Valley A.M. It's going to be a fun, fascinating conversation. John Walls joining us on the show today, currently of his company, Neuro-Built Leadership, but strong, deep, long-standing ties to the Nittany Valley. A lot of interesting life journey we're going to get through today. But, John, we always give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves, not just to us, we know a little bit about you, but to the audience. Just give us a point of entry and we'll go from there.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and grateful for the invitation to you both. So thank you, especially in this lovely room, so warm and welcoming.
It's a cool spot.
I moved to central Pennsylvania in 1990 from Boston, although I grew up down Route 45 near Lewisburg on a small farm.
Okay.
Went to college at the Williamsport Area Community College in Williamsport at the time. Began working in the biomedical engineering field at the Sunbury Community Hospital and transitioned from there to working in Boston. And from Boston, I moved here, got married, and the intent when I first moved here was to only stay for a short period of time, 3 to 4 years.
A common story.
I had my sights set on moving up the corporate ladder of Abbott Diagnostics, which was a Fortune 100 company at the time. So I was going to move from here to either Chicago, Mountain View, or somewhere. And I got married, had my first child, and we developed some great friendships here through the Junior Women's Club in State College. I wonder if it's still going on, the Junior Women's Club.
I don't know, but we'd like to get them on and talk about that if it still is.
They would be a great guest, those folks, if they're still doing it. And through the Junior Women's Club, we met so many people that were about our age in about the same life circumstances as us. You know, young couples with kids or soon to have kids.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful opportunity to meet new people who were a lot like us in a lot of different ways. So then we didn't want to move away. And when those promotional opportunities came, as they did, I kept saying, no, not now. Now's not a good time. And to make a long story short, some years went by, and those opportunities were given to me. And finally, they said, look, you know, when you first moved there, you weren't going to be there for all that long. And if you don't take this opportunity to move to Arizona, we're going to eliminate your position here in central PA.
An ultimatum.
It was a big one. And one of my sons was 10 at the time, playing Little League baseball here in the State College Little League. Moving to Arizona was interesting. It would have been a great opportunity professionally. But that meant leaving these wonderful friends that we developed.
Yeah.
And so I chose not to. And so of course, they did eliminate the position. And, you know, that identity crisis that you go through, if you've ever lost your job after being in a position for so long, you know, you develop some kind of identity to that job. It's who you are, whether you like it or not. And it's the first time I'd experienced that. So it took some time to get used to this unassociation with this profession that I'd known so well for 16 years. And I looked around and I thought, well, I'm going to create my own company. I'm going to start my own company. And did that, and we called it Calix. And we began working with hospital systems, calibrating all types of test and measurement equipment used in medical centers and healthcare facilities around the United States.
It's a good business to be in.
Oh, it was wonderful. Now, there were competitors. The downside, I came into a space where that type of service was viewed as a commodity. And we all know how price-sensitive healthcare systems are. And so they wanted us to play the commodity game. But there was no way we could do that. A small company working out of an office here in State College. In fact, I was at Innovation Park at the time in the incubator. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to play with the commodity game. So that meant we had to develop a level of service that people were willing to pay for. And it took some time to do that. And it accelerated significantly when I began to study the neuroscience behind how to motivate people and how to create intrinsic motivation and the community that you need to create loyalty, not only from the people that you want to do business with, but also from your frontline people, your service people. And to make a long story short, that company was very successful. It grew, and I ended up selling it to a couple really smart guys from Harvard a couple years ago, the Scientific Safety Alliance. And now I'm doing coaching and talking to people about my philosophy of service and what it takes to have an exceptional service so that people are more focused on the quality of service that you provide rather than how much it's going to cost. And that philosophy applies to everything, whether you have a restaurant, whether you're trying to sell copiers, or even doing, what you folks are doing, promoting Central Pennsylvania. It's relevant. If you're trying to provide and add value to other people, then that philosophy works. And it all started with the acoustic brew.
Well, let me to set up the acoustic brew in your foundation of that and why you did it. When did you finally leave Happy Valley and go to Boston and then come back?
I grew up on a farm down in Union County near Lewisburg. I left that area against the wishes of all my friends who didn't think I would stay in Boston. I went to Boston not knowing anybody in 1986.
Okay, so you went up to
In the
Boston in
spring.
'86. And what were you doing up there?
Up there, I was working with Abbott Laboratories at the time. Now, this was the 80s. They were developing new IV technology to deliver drugs intravenously. And they were at the front end of that. And I went up there to essentially be their service person through New England, which was an interesting story because being in my mid-20s at the time, the the sales organization up there was very skeptical about service people. They didn't have good experiences with service people at the time. And
When you say service people,
Yeah.
You mean that you would actually service the equipment, or
That's right.
okay?
Sales
And
people.
why was the experience bad?
The sales organizations in New England had a service representative that was coming up there from New York at the time. And that person apparently ruffled a lot of feathers, both with the sales organization itself and also with the customer. So the sales organization was running around trying to put out fires that a service person
Okay.
caused. And when I showed up, they assumed that I would be similar. And when I showed up, I kind of had been told that they were skeptical. And I showed up wearing it. Back in those days, we wore a suit and a tie whenever we went out in front of customers. And so they were surprised by that because they didn't expect their service person to be so polished, even though I wasn't. I just looked it.
They were looking for some plumber's crack. Is what you're
That's
saying.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, plumber's
All right.
crack. That's good. And that's about what they had before.
Yeah.
And that's why there were so many problems.
Okay.
When they got me, I wasn't technically great in that regard, but I could communicate really well. And that was them telling me this. And so they had a different species of service person when I showed up on the scene. And it didn't take too long for me to win over their hearts, because they could take me to a customer site, and I could communicate to the customer during that sales process, say at Brigham and Women's Hospital or Mass General, when they're competing with all the other all the other IV companies who want to put in 1,000 IV pumps into their hospital. But they had me. I was going to be their service person, and I was able to communicate exactly how I would be helpful to them. And we ended up winning a lot of business that way. And to make a long story short, I learned a lot of lessons about how to communicate with salespeople and how to position service as a value-added product that people are willing to pay for, even though our price was more expensive than the other competitors. Because the easiest thing for a service provider to do is say, I'm going to do it for less. And that's not my philosophy whatsoever. And that's what I help people do. You know, for those people that are doing it for less, I say, you should be, if you're so good, and everybody says they're good, right? I'm the best at what I do, you're the best at what, you know, if we all do the same thing, we're all doing it great. We all look a lot alike to the customer from a distance. Well, that's like that at the enterprise scale and also at the local scale, where you might be the painter that says, I've been painting for 35 years. Well, so have you. You've been painting for 35 years as well. What's the difference between us? Well, the difference could be price, but we don't want that. We want to get as much money as we can. So if I'm able to communicate things other than my experience to you and relate to you on a level that resonates with you, then you can charge more for your product.
Our good mutual friend, Greg's of mine, Ben Lawrence, who was a key part of growing KCF Technologies here in State College, he calls that pricing war strategy a race to the bottom. And I think that's probably right.
It is indeed. That's probably why they're so successful too. He recognizes that.
Right. And so you're in Boston, so I'm eager to say, what made you boomerang back to Central PA? Like, you were married at the time?
I was single throughout my 20s in Boston.
Okay.
I smile when I say that because it was so much fun. But I did.
So what got
Boston
you
in the 80s, I am sure, was, as the kids would say today, a vibe. Yes?
It was great.
Yeah.
So you decide to come back to Happy Valley. What was the trigger? What was the strategic filter from which you made that choice to come back to Happy Valley?
Working so closely with the sales organization in New England, the regional managers up there started saying nice things about me, and I thought, whoa, I grew up on a farm. Now I have an opportunity to be something other, to go up the ladder, so to speak. And I was still in my 20s, and so those things are important to you in your 20s, especially when you're single. And so the opportunity came up to transfer to another division that was once again on the cutting edge of technology in their space, and it was Abbott's Diagnostics Division. Abbott at the time, this was the late 80s, coming up with automated analyzers that changed the way testing was done in clinical laboratories. It was really exciting. It's kind of as exciting as AI is now, and the internet was back in 1989, 1988. It was the same thing, although they were transforming how testing was done in clinical laboratories. And of course, the old school clinical lab techs were fighting it tooth and nail. Very similar to what's happening now with AI.
Sure, right.
Any kind of significant change is scary to people.
So they gave you the opportunity to come here?
So they gave me the opportunity. There was an opening here in central Pennsylvania. What they really needed was somebody who could get to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and Buffalo. And boy, what better place than here in central Pennsylvania, directly above the center of the earth.
Yes, sir. That's where I met my wife, directly above the center of the earth. We got engaged there as well.
Yeah.
Xenos, for
Yes,
those
sir.
of you not in the know. But yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. By the way, Greg is smiling because you just made the point he loves to emphasize about the centrality of this area and the ease of access to all these major metros. Really, one of the many, many selling points of Happy Valley, as we talk about here on Connect Happy Valley A.M., one of the best places to live, work, play, raise a family, start a business, or retire. And so, John, you came here somewhat out of necessity. The company said, we're going to give you this opportunity, and this is where it's at. But what I find interesting, really compelling actually, especially for the message of this program, is that you're still here today because you remained out of choice. That was a conscious decision that you made. And I want to dig into that as we go through the hour here. But you mentioned acoustic brew, and you talked about how the friends you and your wife made here in Happy Valley were one of the reasons that you decided to stick around. We're building this brand. We're building this show. Connect Happy Valley A.M. So there are moving pieces. Our loyal viewers know The format is still being tweaked. There's going to be a big change on Monday. The site and the company are still changing. And so one of the things that just happened is the tagline this week just changed to "You belong here," which can mean a couple different things depending on how you look at it. And as I listen to you talk about what's kept you here, and I think about what has kept me and Greg and what we heard from the folks who came out to the first monthly Connect Happy Valley social on Wednesday night here at Pine Grove Hall, this theme of belonging keeps coming up again and again. And we're all looking for that, probably now more than ever because of the way the machinations of our society and the technological advancements have made it so easy to just disconnect from people, and yet we still long for that. So talk a little bit about, you get to Happy Valley for work, you start putting roots down in the community, and I have to guess, and you could correct me if I'm off the mark here, part of what drives that acoustic brew story that I want to tell now is that innate compulsion to connect and find belonging. Am I?
Well, you're not off the mark. Okay. That is exactly what happened. When I lived in Boston, I would go very frequently to Harvard Square. Have you ever been to Harvard Square?
I have not.
Right out, it's on the campus of Harvard, of course, and it's a circus. And for a farm boy in my 20s, that was the place to go on a Friday and Saturday night for excitement of all kinds. And I came across a acoustic music venue there.
Okay.
And it was called the Nameless Coffee House, right on the corner of Harvard Square. It was a legendary place. In fact, I was there for their 20th anniversary, so this would have been 86. So they were there since, help me with the math, 66.
60.
So they'd seen all of these acoustic music performers come through Boston and play at their gig. And I thought, well, what a wonderful way to meet a bunch of Harvard people and hang out in Harvard Square. So I began to volunteer at this place and ultimately ended up becoming one of the volunteer managers. It was all volunteer run. And they had concerts every Saturday night. So when I moved I fell in love with acoustic music and singer-songwriter music, mostly in New England. All the great ones were there. Bill Morrissey, John Gorka, Greg Brown, for example. Cormac McCarthy was one who we're trying to bring here to Pine Grove Hall.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And when I moved here to take this position at Abbott, it wasn't long and I started to miss that because I started going out to the bars and hearing, singer-songwriters, what I thought were singer-songwriters, but I learned then that I live in a college town. College kids don't want to hear original songs by these singer-songwriters, and I started having conversations with the ones that I would go out to see. Local legends, John Cunningham, J.R. Mangan, for example. And they would say, because I'd be in the audience saying, play an original tune, and I'd be the only person that wanted to hear it. So we would talk during the breaks, and they said, yeah, man, this is not the crowd for me to play my original stuff. And at that time, I was making friends, and I joined the folk staff at WPSU. Mm-hmm. They had the Folk Show, another legendary program at Penn State. And I became one of the folk show hosts and met the other hosts and started running the idea by them that, geez, we have some decent singer-songwriters around here. Why don't we have a place where they can go to play their original music? This is what artists do. They show their music. And there was no place like that. And I thought, well, geez, if I start my own gig, then perhaps I could entice Bill Morrissey and Greg Brown and those guys to come down here and play in central Pennsylvania. So I started running the idea by the folk show, by my colleagues on the folk show. And they thought, yeah, that's great. That's good. I think that's a good idea. And we started looking for a venue. And I looked around for a bit. I knew I wanted it to be acoustic because I didn't have all the skills that I needed. I didn't have microphones, so it needed to be a venue where you could get on stage with a guitar and very little amplification and play to a bunch of people who were willing to listen and not there to drink beer and eat wings and talk to their friends, as you might find anywhere downtown. I stopped in here at the time because I thought the stage was wonderful, but the people that owned it at the time weren't interested in this. Now, this was 1991. To make a long story short, I came across the Center for Wellbeing in Lamont. And the Center for Wellbeing was very welcoming. It held about 100 people. It's in an old church, so the acoustics in the Center for Wellbeing are exceptional. And I started making some calls, and lo and behold, people were willing to come here for a relatively little bit of money, and as they were making their way between New York City and Chicago, usually.
Why do you
driving
think
on
that?
Route 80.
Why is that? Give us a little window into that world of the traveling performer. They get this invitation to stop in State College, Pennsylvania, which I'm guessing maybe many of them had never even heard of until they got that invite. And what motivates the yes from somebody who makes their living as a musician on the road?
Well, they're very practical people. They don't want to waste any nights on the road. The other thing that intrigued a lot of performers is you rarely get a chance to play truly acoustic in front of a live audience where they're there to listen. The Acoustic Brew was a listening room. There was no food. We had snacks and coffee, but it was set up concert style, 6 rows of chairs, and people were there to hear every note and every lyric. You could hear a pin drop during a performance.
It was the attraction. You talk about bar music oftentimes is just the soundtrack. It's not what brings people in the door, or
Yep.
maybe not primarily.
Yeah, primarily not. I agree. They liked that idea. They liked the idea of playing acoustic, and to some it was very intimidating. And I've got a story about Queen Bee and the Blue Hornet Band. You want to hear that?
Sure.
Yeah, Queen Bee
I
and the
do,
Blue Hornet Band?
yeah.
Back in those days, they were a major act. They just happened to be from State College.
Yep.
And they were traveling up and down the East Coast primarily, blues band. And I had been trying to get them to play at the Acoustic Brew. But they had to play acoustic, which was different for them. They're a hard-driving blues band. And finally one day, Mark Ross, who was the mover and shaker, said, "Hey, we got an open date on a Saturday night. We can do the Acoustic Brew if you want." I said, "Yes, sir." So we made a show happen. And they all came with their acoustic instrumentation, and not only did they come with their instrumentation, but they came with the recording equipment. They wanted to record the show, to put a couple tracks onto their next album. And that was fascinating because Mark Ross and I were in the back of the room. They had an opening act, and we're standing in the back of the room waiting for them to go on, and Mark looks over to me, and this is a guy who's played in front of the big crowds with B.B. King and others on the national circuit, so he's familiar with being on stage. But after listening to the opening act and how the crowd listened so intently, Mark and I in the back, and he says, "John, I got to tell you, I'm a little uptight about this. Like, I've never had anybody listen to us as closely as these people do." So I got a big kick out of that. I thought that was very amusing that a guy as experienced as Mark would feel that way about the specialness of this room. And they recorded a few tracks. In fact, they recorded so many tracks, they put an entire acoustic album live at the Acoustic Brew together. So that's the crown jewel of my time at the
I'm sure.
Acoustic Brew. It's a great point of pride.
So just to pause and catch folks up, again, we'll welcome everybody in Friday morning, smoky Friday morning here in the Nittany Valley. It's Connect Happy Valley A.M. live from Pine Grove Hall. And Greg and I are talking with John Walls, who's walking us through a really interesting Happy Valley journey. There's some fun storytelling we get to do with our guests, especially this week. It's been a great week for guests, Greg. And we're talking about something you founded, Acoustic Brew, live, truly, purely acoustic music performances, all original work by the artists who performed them. It was at the Center for Wellbeing in Lamont, Mount Nittany Road.
An old church.
The old church, cool little spot. And you came, as we have been discussing, from Boston, although you grew up a PA farm boy in Union County, came to Happy Valley for work, and so we're in the 90s. You're working with WPSU and the folk show, and recognize a vacancy in the market. There's no place for singer-songwriters to perform true acoustic, their own work. So I'm going to hitch up my pants and I'm going to make one. What were the crowds like? You said you would get 100 plus people. What kind of people are coming to a show like this? The reason I ask is because one of the things that I find so wonderful about this place and why I've loved living here for 30 years about is the variety of folks you get to meet in this valley. And so no matter what your interest, whether you want to double down on that or you want to broaden your horizons, you're going to find some fascinating people who can bring you along on that journey. So talk a little bit about the people who came out to an Acoustic Brew show.
Well, I started the Acoustic Brew, for all intents and purposes, for very selfish reasons. I wanted to bring people to town that I missed in New England and give an opportunity for the locals as well. And it turned out that the people that would come to the Acoustic Brew were a lot like me in the sense that they loved acoustic music, they were tired of the bar scene, and all the noise and distractions that go along with it. And one of the things there's three things I learned about the Acoustic Brew. One is the intrinsic motivation that you get from creating something that other people tell you they love. Is it feels good. You're adding value to their lives. The other one is resilience. I'll tell you a story about resilience if you'd like to hear that. And then the other one is community.
Yeah.
So you bring, you create a space that people are kind of intrigued by. They come and strangers begin to have conversations and they connect and they say, wow, this felt good. I want to come back and do it again in 2 weeks or in a month. And they do. So you start to have this synergy that begins to occur. And the more they come back and enjoy themselves as the founder and the one who was doing most of the work, that was very motivating for me. That was the intrinsic motivation that came from a whole bunch of people saying, thank you, John, for doing this. We had so much fun. The performers would go, my God, I never played in a gig like this before. Man, thanks for the opportunity. I want to come back next year. All that did was create a fire in me, the intrinsic motivation that we want to create in all the people we work with. And I learned that lesson about how to create that intrinsic motivation. And it has to do with creating something and adding value and giving people the opportunity to have fun in a space where they can relate to other people who are somewhat like them to some degree.
And if I can jump in, and you started this journey by volunteering up in Harvard Square.
That's right.
At an acoustic place, and you didn't say pay me, you went in as a volunteer. And then you went, and when you came back to State College, you wanted to volunteer up at WPSU to kind of advocate for acoustic music. And when you did the Acoustic Brew, was there money motivation in that at all, or did you do that all volunteer also?
I funded it out of my pocket. So the short answer to your question is no, it wasn't intended to make money. Although I was not interested in losing money either. I had a very capitalist and entrepreneurial spirit about it. It was funded completely out of my pocket. I had some confidence that, especially after the first show, that it was going to at least not cost me too much money, and at the same time I could bring this community. I felt good about the things that I was hearing from others, that intrinsic motivation. Now, there were hassles involved that caused me some stress during that time. One of them actually had to do with a cease and desist letter that I received from College Township. So it wasn't after 3 or 4 shows that we received a letter from the local authorities saying, you're creating a nuisance here in Lamont, and we need to shut you down. And if you do this again, we're going to send the police over and they will arrest you for disturbing the peace. So
If I could come up with a better infomercial for how great Happy Valley is as a place to live, I don't know that I could concoct that it is a place where they will send the cops to break up an acoustic folk music show. That's what we have our police doing here in Happy Valley. I live in the place where the cops talk about the time they investigated the murder. It is truly a unique and special place. I'm sorry, go on.
this was 1993.
How'd you work through it?
Well, what I did was I took that letter. Well, I should say also, I had been getting all kind of great feedback from the people of Lamont. They loved this. In fact, they would come to the show. So I was meeting all these neighbors and things. So it really was surprising to me that one of them was complaining. And I thought, well, who is it? I need to find out. So I actually took the letter, and for a couple afternoons, I knocked on every door in that, most of the doors in Lamont.
Sure.
That were impacted by traffic and noise, for example. And at one of the doors, the lady said, I think you should talk to Mrs. whatever her name was down the street. I said, wow, really? I knocked on her door. She didn't answer. Well, you should talk with her because she works at the township building. And I thought, okay. So sure enough, I ultimately made a great effort to talk with this person. And lo and behold, the person at the township building was the one who caused this letter to be sent to me. She didn't like the music. She didn't like the traffic. And understandably, she had a quiet village. And on this one night a month,
The traffic.
it was problematic to her. So after I had that conversation, I just ignored the letter. And I never heard another word from College Township. The cops never came.
The
And we were
riot
happy.
squad never kicked down the doors of the wellness center
No.
in Lamont? Okay, good stuff.
So it's
Break up
really
the
what
folk show.
what I learned from that was resilience. I could have easily had gone, this is the game. The game's up, and given up. But I thought, this is ridiculous. So many people tell me they love this. How can this happen? What can I do to help overcome this objection
Yeah.
that had come from on high?
That's great. It's a great lesson there. A life lesson in all of that. You're absolutely right.
And you're doing this while you're starting a business, and you were doing this while raising a family,
I wasn't starting a business at that time.
Okay.
This was, 1993. I was involved I was raising a family. I had already had one son by that time. And a couple years later, I had two sons simultaneously. So I had twins. And that's when the writing was on the wall. I had to do something about the acoustic brew. And I didn't want it to end. And we had wonderful volunteers that were there from the beginning to help this happen. I mean, this didn't happen because I was a hard worker. I mean, there were people that joined in from the very first show to help do the little things that I never could have done alone. It was a massive community forming. And two of those people were Linda Littleton and Mel DeYoung. Mel used to be the host of the morning show on WPSU, and Linda is a member of the legendary band Simple Gifts, based out of Lamont.
Okay.
So Mel and Linda volunteered to take over the acoustic brew after I was involved for about first 6 years. And I felt comfortable that they were going to keep it going. And sure enough, they did a bang-up job. Kept the volunteer organization motivated and pleased. Brought in wonderful bands because Linda was touring all over, so she could have contacts to bands that I didn't have contact with. And I stepped out, became a dad full time, did the Little League thing, and that was the end of my involvement, for all intents and purposes, with the acoustic brew, other than to go to shows from time to time.
And did your children, John, go to the state college schools?
State college, yeah. That's
Yeah.
why we stayed. That's one of the reasons why we stayed. We thought, well, geez, we're going to have kids now. I don't want to go to Chicago or any of these other places that had the opportunity to go because, kids are the focus, and school is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And Little League's a big deal.
Well, it actually was. but friends as well.
Yeah.
You know, so we as a young couple, we were in a good spot, and we didn't want to mess that up. But I had to find other things then to do to put food on the table. And when that opportunity fell through with, or when my job was eliminated from Abbott, and I started Calix, that was the next stage of life.
It was a great ecosystem here to support that startup of your business. You mentioned Innovation Park,
Yeah.
Dan Leary, and the incubator. Did they play a factor in helping
They did.
lift you up from startup?
They absolutely did. And that's one of the things that anybody listening to this program should be encouraged by, because if you have an idea here in State College, there's a lot of help you can get to develop that idea. And I had a business that didn't have any intellectual property. I was just trying to do a service that was better than all the others. And fortunately, I had this Small Business Development Center at Innovation Park, took me on as a client and helped write the business plan. I mean, they really held my hand through the entire process, which was very intimidating to me. I had a lot of confidence that I could sell service, but I didn't have the confidence of knowing how to run a business at the time, or even how to manage people that I was responsible for. And the Small Business Development Center was instrumental in that, and the Innovation Park staff was wonderful. So we were in the incubator for 5 years until we fledged and went out into an office outside, off campus, essentially.
You mentioned the Small Business Development Center, Innovation Park. There's up there in Innovation Park, Ben Franklin's headquarters are up there. There's Penn Tap. We have Invent Penn State. We have the Launch Box downtown. I mean, the ecosystem is just amazing. And the whole goal of Penn State in transferring research into commercial enterprises, I mean, that's the number one priority of Penn State and their strategic plan. Because we have all these professors, we have all this IP, and commercializing. Most of the businesses in our area that are our biggest employers have been spun off of Penn State. From HRB Singer, it's now Raytheon, on and on. ResTech, it's KCF Technologies, we talked about Ben Franklin. So that Innovation Park, and great to hear that story. You're a poster child of the support it can give you from idea to fledgling and out, and then you had a nice exit.
Mission accomplished.
So I do want to talk a little bit in just a few moments, John, about, you mentioned at the top of the hour how it sounds like, again, almost out of necessity, as you're out there competing in a crowded marketplace offering only a service. As again, you said there's no proprietary IP behind your business. You learn about neuroscience. You start taking this up. So I want to get there, but before we do, because I think it's an important point, speaks to my heart and certainly to the key platform plank of this program, Connect Happy Valley A.M., which we appreciate everybody joining us for this morning, live from Pine Grove Hall on a smoky Friday morning in the Nittany Valley. As I said, you chose to be here. You said you're at a great company. You're at Abbott. That your role and being a part of that company had become part of your identity. And you had a gut check moment where they said, okay, no more passing up opportunities to leave. We got to move you up or out of the org chain. And that's a real tough decision when you're in a position like you are in life where you've got a family to support and you've got this goal you've held since your early 20s that I want to move up the ranks in this great company. And I kind of think of myself as John from Abbott. And now I've got to pick a direction at a fork in the road. And one direction takes me somewhere else where I get to keep all that. And the other one goes to the unknown, but I get to stay in Happy Valley. And the reason why that speaks to my heart is, as Greg knows, I have at multiple points in my life faced that same fork in the road. And every time, I think relatively easily, just listen to my heart and pick the place where I wake up in the morning every single day, best day, worst day, overjoyed and grateful to love where I live. And so I'm just curious if you can take us inside the thought process and what ultimately led you to make that same choice.
The need for certainty. In hindsight, we're driven by 5 things: status, our need for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So if you think about the decision in hindsight, if I think about the decision I made back then, it was all based on uncertainty and my desire to avoid it. And my feeling was, if I moved away with my family, there was a lot of uncertainty there. How would the kids be in school? How would we do with friends? And all those things that are, important for happiness. The uncertainty that was here was all that is going to be satisfied. We've got a friend network. Our kids have great schools. They're going to be comfortable. All I got to do is challenge that uncertainty to do something that makes money and satisfies somebody's unmet need. And I felt confident that I could do that. So it was a matter of choices. Uncertainty played a role in both of those decisions. And my feeling was my family's much more important than my level of comfort of taking another job. So, if we could have left, it would have been very comfortable to me to move into another position at Abbott. I would have had a built-in, work friend network. My family's out there in this little island. My wife didn't have friends. That support network that she had, the kids would be learning, trying to make friends. And so, rather than sacrifice them, not to make myself the hero, but the point is that when you're dealing with uncertainty, do you put yourself or your family first? Who do you want to give certainty to the most? And it's a fathering thing that I believe that too many dads that I saw at Abbott put their needs first.
Yeah.
And some things worked out, some didn't.
Well, and the beauty of it is that you made that choice in a place where you could find a soft landing, because as you described just now, there's such a solid foundation to support somebody who's got some ability and a work ethic and a willingness to go after an idea to start a business here. So let's talk a little bit about the neuroscience angle, which I know Greg and I are both fascinated to learn more about. Was this again out of necessity? You just recognized this as a path to improving your ability to close sales? Is that what drove your learning on that front?
Yes and no. So it started out, first of all, the first few years of Calix were not good years. We were burning cash and burning through my savings as well. And a tragedy occurred at about that time. One of my buddies, his son, who was a football player, and he suffered a concussion on either the first or second day of spring football practice.
Yeah.
And 3 days later, he committed suicide. So we were shocked. You can imagine how terrible that was. No one understood why. Back in the day, this was 18 years ago. So no one really understood concussions and what was going on. Everyone was trying to find the reason why this wonderful young man would do such a thing to himself. And his sister, through the haze of all this, the day after it occurred, Brandon said his head was killing him, and he did this. My head's killing me. Well, at that time, I didn't know what the prefrontal cortex was, but I did go to the computer that was in the kitchen of my friend's house, and I just Googled, tell me about the front part of our head and what it's responsible for. And one of the things that occurs in our prefrontal cortex is our ability to control our inhibitions. And I believe what happened to Brandon was he damaged that aspect of his brain, and over the course of 3 days, it deteriorated and led to him not being able to stop himself
Yeah.
from doing something that most of us would go, gee, that doesn't make any sense. Well, to him, it made perfect sense because he didn't have that capability anymore. And that led to me studying more about, whoa, the magic of the brain, how powerful it is. And then as I read more and more about emerging neuroscience, which was just emerging at that time because of the development of functional MRI, which allows us to see the brain
Sure.
more clearly than ever.
Late 90s at this point?
It was this would have been 2004 or something,
Oh, okay.
somewhere around
Okay.
there. I'm not sure. And the more I realized, more I studied the neuroscience, the more I became fascinated by it. And then I started seeing research from an organization from New York City called the Neuroleadership Institute. And I started following what they were publishing. And it turns out that the emerging neuroscience tells us why people do and say the things they do and say. Now, this fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, is at the same level as the telescopes were back in the 1600s. When Galileo developed the telescope, he was able to see the heavens like we've never seen before, and it transformed the way we thought about astronomy. The microscope was a few years later, and it changed the way we viewed these invisible things that we found out were making us sick. And they were transformative in those sciences. Well, fMRI is transformative as well as far as human behavior goes. We now see the brain with a clarity that we've never seen before, and we can do it while people are functioning. If we had you hooked up to an fMRI, we would know exactly what part of your brain is being activated and stimulated by what I'm saying. And then we would say, oh, yeah, Chris was really got excited about this aspect of John's conversation.
So you see those little heat maps of the brain online? That's fMRI?
It maybe. I don't. It's hard to tell unless it actually lists it as.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been able to look at the brain to some degree for a long time, but it was just back in the 70s we were still analyzing brains by slicing them up and looking at them under a microscope and trying to figure out what was happening. That's why psychology became the way we understand what people do. Well, psychology these days is, and if there's any psychologists listening, they're going to like this, is to some degree passé, because we have neuroscience. Now, the combination of both is incredibly powerful. Mm-hmm. But some psychologists, psychiatrists are somewhat intimidated by neuroscience because of, they consider woo-woo science. Well, it's nothing to that degree. So, to make a long story short, I started to adapt that to my people at Calix, to help them develop, to grow. I recruited using the new neuroscience that I was learning, and I was using it in marketing and sales as well. And sure enough, it proved incredibly effective. And it added value to people who wanted to work at Calix and chose to stay there when they could have had options.
So you turned it into an assessment? Like when you're interviewing people, you could find out their true intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic? And is that become your practice as you help companies? Is it for recruitment? Is it to kind of build teams, the
Yes.
sense of belonging? Is it
Yes.
to create the Beatles circa 1964?
Yes. Well, let's talk about the Beatles for a second, because the Beatles are a wonderful example of psychological safety and what you get from it. If anybody's seen the Get Back video, have you seen
Amazing.
it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you see this scene there where John and Paul are sitting kind of like we are right now? They're working on Get Back. Paul had this idea, and he's going through some things, northern Arizona, blah, blah, blah. And he suddenly says, Tucson, Arizona. And John looks at him and goes, like that. Now when you have that kind of relationship and you can kick ideas around like that without being judged and That's psychological safety, and that's what we need in our organizations. And that's, I believe, why him and John and Paul wrote such tremendous songs, because they could sit there and just kick ideas off without being concerned whatsoever if they were being judged by the other person. They just had that kind of mojo because of that psychological safety. We need that in our work.
And that mojo is tied back to neuroscience.
It certainly is. So I mentioned earlier, there's 5 social needs that every single person has. Anybody who's breathing needs to have a sense of status and feel like they're important to other people. They need to have certainty. We get very uncomfortable if we don't have certainty. We talked about uncertainty earlier, right? We try to avoid it at all. We need autonomy. We need to have choices. There's a menu here at Pine Grove Hall. We got choices. If they just had 1 or maybe even 2, they might not have enough choices to get people to come, but they have 4. We need relatedness. We need to feel like we're part of a community. And when we feel like we're part of the community, we feel good. And we need fairness. We need to know that we're being treated in a fair way, and that the playing field is equal for all. If we don't have them, and we tend to look for threats to these things because we have a negativity bias, so we're always scanning the room for threats to one of those 5 things. If we don't have them, we don't have intrinsic motivation. We actually are focusing on the negative. We're distracted by the fact that I don't feel like we have a relationship. What can I do? I don't know. But if we do have them, then we have intrinsic motivation. So, for example, when I would interview people from mostly young men to come to Calix, we would sit down. Usually, we'd take them to lunch. And tell me about the job. Why do you want to leave the job that you have now? And they would say, well, I've got a manager who is not very kind to me. Yeah, tell me about that. What's he do? Well, he does this and that. He does, and okay. And it would involve either the threats to the person's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Now, my philosophy was, and it is a philosophy of leadership. My philosophy was, those are the things I want for you. I want you to feel incredibly important at work, and I'm going to help you feel that way. I want to give you certainty. I'm going to communicate in a way that you don't have to guess anymore about things. I'm going to give you autonomy. And then, by the way, I only hire good people, like I think you are. You're going to have a good team. You're going to feel part of the tribe, let's just say. And by the way, we give you full health care. We do this, and we will treat you fairly. And we know very well that your family comes first. It's only fair to your family. So if we can find a way to work together, we're happy to have you on our team. And I had people tell me before we even talked about money that they wanted to join the team because they need those 5 aspects of their social lives.
Now,
they treat them like survival issues.
Now, you attended the Connect Happy Valley Social upstairs on Wednesday night. And there were 15 people who didn't know each other come together. You made a strategic decision to show up, and which go through the 5 things or whatever. You chose to give up 2 hours to come into this space, this third place we call it. And at the end of the night, you blew me away when we were going around kind of concluding things. I think Melissa, the ultimate lead connector, said, everybody, we were all having conversations every 20 minutes, and then she'd play her harmonica and then ask us a question. And she said, can everybody just quickly talk about some joy from this week that you want to share with what were strangers now that we got to know each other, what joy they shared? And, the 15 people, and you were the last one. Do you remember what you said?
Well, it was a great joy to be amongst everybody in that way, or something to that.
Well, you actually...
I felt like... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You felt.
No, I want to hear
I'm not going to cut you off
think...
when you say feel. But you ended, you said, my joy is, right now, I don't want this to end. And I just go, wow. So can you explain, based on especially all that we've learned about you, and I really, got to know you a little more that night. I had met you once before briefly, but it was a wonderful thing that you can kind of conclude it with. But with your neuroscience background and these 5 things you mentioned, and What did that mean when you said that? You felt?
Well, there's certain times in our lives that we don't experience enough. When you're having so much fun and you're having all of those needs satisfied in some way. I mentioned when I did that talk that dates, are like that. When you're dating and courting somebody, you may go out on a date and you're having so much fun. The conversation is so intriguing, and you're really feeling the connection between yourself and the person you're with. Let's not end this. And I kind of felt that with the people that I spoke with there as well. We first of all, Melissa did an incredible job of making sure that we had connections with other people. We had a reason to talk to people. And I think that it's one of the sad things in life that we don't find those reasons on our own to have conversations with people. Think about how much fun life would be. And that's what we had up there. We were talking and we were learning about people that were very interesting, came from diverse backgrounds, and I felt like there was more people to talk to, and we were running out of time.
Right. And so how does music play? You mentioned the Beatles. You're the founder of Acoustic Brew. You were wanting to get that feeling you had in Boston, and you brought it here to Happy Valley. Sum that all up. We only have a couple more minutes left, and this is why we're, the laboratory of Connect Happy Valley is we're trying to connect people to places like here, and more importantly, to each other, and to become the most connected community in the world. And I just learned today, we, Center County here in Happy Valley, we are #1 in the state for longevity of life. We're like at 81.5 years of
I saw the
longevity.
map where we were the dark purple county on the map of Pennsylvania
and so I put
for
that
longevity.
into AI. I said, how do we fare in the United States? We're like in the top 3% for longevity of life. Do you think we saw a little slice of paradise Wednesday night that's going to have us live longer?
The neuroscience, the research points to yes. If more people went out and did those kind of events, they'd be happier people. We need the social connection. We need the relatedness that I mentioned in this model. We need to feel like we're part of a tribe in some way. And there's so many lonely people out there.
It's an epidemic.
It certainly it is. And I know we're running out of time, but I want to tell you a story about somebody I interviewed at Calix one time. He was a cable TV repairman. He came and talked to me, and we were talking about repeat calls. Repeat calls is when you go somewhere to do some work and then have to go back for some reason a day or two later. It's a negative thing in the service industry, and I wanted to see how this person responded to that. So we were talking about that. He says, I've had a number of repeat calls where they were to elderly people's homes. And I would show up, not really be able to find anything wrong, but the lady, usually it was a woman, would have cookies and things there for me to eat. And then they would call back a couple days later and ask for the same person, ask for me to come back, and the same thing. And he felt like the reason they were doing that isn't because they actually had a problem, but they wanted someone to talk to and have cookies with.
Wow.
Now that's very touching to me, and it is an epidemic. And it is especially an epidemic with older people. Now, I'm 65 years old. When you retire from your work, you have a lot of friends at your work. But are they really friends? Because
Right.
when you retire, you leave them behind. So then you're on your own. And we, as men particularly, haven't developed those friendship networks that women have as they're raising the children and talking about babies and changing diapers and all these skills that are prefrontal cortex related regarding communication and empathy, women develop. Us men don't do that as much. And so then when we retire, we don't know how to make friends. We don't know how to come out to events. You notice up there the room was predominantly women. More men need to get out and take a chance and invite people out to lunch or out for a drink. And we will live longer. If
It's proven.
the happier we are, the more relationships we have, the science is clear. We'll live longer. And if that's what Happy Valley is, then we're really living up to our name.
Well, John Walls, currently neurobuiltleadership.com is your company where your consulting services are available. You can learn more about John, what he does. It's been a pleasure. This was a really nice way to end the week because you've got a varied and unique Happy Valley story, which is what we're trying to elevate here at Connect Happy Valley AM and at Connect Happy Valley. So you go to connecthappyvalley.com, sign up for the weekly e-letter. I know there are rumors swirling that it may go twice a week.
Three times.
Three times
Sunday,
a week.
Wednesday, Friday.
Greg is getting
We got to
very
get this
ambitious
story out three
with
times
the
a week.
e-letters. Yes, and we want to thank again our hosts here at Pine Grove Hall. Really cool spot. One of the, as I like to say, gems of the Nittany Valley. A distinctive location, a great menu, and I know, John, you are currently contributing some of your own services to help provide one of the real distinguishing factors of Pine Grove Hall, which is consistent live music from all over the place to satisfy any interest, plus some events. Go to pinegrovehall.com to see the event calendar, view the menu, and book your reservations. We're going to get out of here today. Try not to breathe the air if you're watching locally for the next 24 hours, and we'll see you on the other side of the weekend. Until then, everybody, enjoy Happy Valley.
Thank you, John. That was great.
Oh, thank you guys.
Great, John.
That was
Yes,
fun.
thanks so much. Yeah,
Thanks
these are
for the good
great. These are
questions.
great. Oh, yeah. Thanks for being